One huge pitfall was last year, like I mentioned, like we were growing, and I realized I was actually losing money, and that was a big problem. So we had to completely revamp and let a few people go and change over the staff a little bit, which was really tough. Don't confuse growth with profit. You got to know your numbers and see what's really happening, and don't be blind to it because I was blind to it.
Hoodie, thank you so much for joining me on the Let's Talk Business podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Manny.
Sure. So we've known each other for quite some time now. We've been
Yes.
utilizing your services and photography for a lot of our clients throughout the years. For our listeners that maybe don't know about you, tell us a little bit about your history, how you got into photography, and currently what you're doing.
Sure. Okay. So how I got into photography. So I shoot products and food mainly. And when I first started photography, I actually was playing guitar. I had a band. I gave lessons and all that kind of good stuff. And I bought my first camera to shoot guitar lessons. And I was planning on putting them on YouTube with a little clip, but like as a plug for my band in the beginning of the lessons. But I was going to return the camera when I was done. I was not, I was not planning on doing this. Somehow I knew it was also about the lighting. So I bought like a basic 3-point lighting kit from B&H, set it all up in my living room, nice black background. The videos, they looked great. And so after I finished shooting the videos, like the next morning, it was all still set up in the living room. So I started taking some pictures of my kids, and those did not work at all. So I was like, that's so weird. Like, if the video works, why shouldn't the photos work? And like in my mind, it was the same thing. Okay, so now I know it's, if for any photographers out there listening, it's the shutter speed and ISO. But at the time, I was like, that doesn't make sense. So I started doing a little research, and my brain loves creative and technical things, which is why I'm a musician and I do woodworking and I cook and all these fun things. So once I started researching it, like it was game over, and like I just like took over my life for for a few months. So to start with, I was just like, I didn't want to do this as a living because in my mind, photography was weddings and bar mitzvahs, which I was already doing with music, and it was already crazy late nights. I didn't want more of that. So this is like 2011, 2012, and it was right when Amazon was opening up their marketplace to outside sellers. So a friend of mine, a neighbor of mine, he thought maybe it's a good idea if he posts better pictures like on his listing, maybe he'll make more sales. Like ding, right?
Yeah,
Now it's like quite obvious.
yeah.
So he asked me to shoot it. He was selling sunglasses and watches and scarves, not actually pretty hard items actually to shoot. And after he posted the new photos, his sales tripled literally overnight,
Wow.
especially because back then it was a brand new platform. So he paid me like $100 an hour, and I was like, if I can triple your sales for $100 an hour, I can triple your sales for $500 an hour also. And within 3 months, I had quit everything. I was like, I had an IT job, I quit, no more music, no more lessons, everything out the door, and full-time product photography, and I haven't looked back.
Beautiful, beautiful. So there's a lot to dissect there, and I want to go into some details. But
Sure.
interesting because now remember that you were doing some music, dabbling in music prior. I think
Right.
we spoke about it years ago.
Yeah.
Something that I found very fascinating, and I'm not sure how you see it from your lens, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a lot of people in the creative space, such as photography, videographers, even creative graphic designers or marketing directors that have a passion to music. And it seems like, so to speak, that's the easiest way into exploring your creativity. And then you're figuring out, okay, I need to put it into some sort of business setting.
Right.
And that's where you transition out of music and do something on the side. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question. I mean, to me, creativity is the person that has a vision and is able to take that vision and put it into reality. Like a simple example, like my wife, well, she's creative in her own way, but not in the traditional sense of what we call creative. When I say the word pineapple, she sees the word Pinapple. She sees the word pineapple. I see a picture of a pineapple.
I know.
Right?
So
So
cool.
she's amazing at games like Scrabble and at anagrams and bananagrams. And she destroys me every single time because I see a jumble of letters and my brain does not see any word inside that jumble of letters. And she, in a second, picks it right out. And I
Yeah.
have a couple kids like that and a couple kids the other way. It's cute. So yeah. So when someone is a creative in the traditional sense of what we call in the creative industry, yeah, they're able to take that vision, that image they have in their head, whether it's music or pictures or graphic design or any of that kind of stuff. And they're able to bring that vision into reality.
I want to start by something I've seen throughout working with you and my team working with you, and ultimately also a lot of the content that you post about the work you do. There's a certain passion, even years later, and you still do a good photo shoot, and there's the passion behind it. It's a twofold question. One is, how much does that passion drive you to continue to be excellent at what you do and constantly try to improve and see what else you could do? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, what drives you? How do you feed the momentum and that passion not to wear out? Because sometimes you get into the habit of doing the same thing. Yeah, it's a different dish and it's a different,
Right.
product, but ultimately it's more or less the same structure. How do you keep yourself motivated and keep that drive?
Okay, great question. So for starters, everyone thinks that I have this major passion for photography. I always get the comment like, "Oh, it's so amazing that you're able to take your passion and make it into a living." My passion is not photography. I kind of fell into this, like as the story I mentioned before. Not that I don't enjoy it, I certainly do. But like of all my creative things, if there was one thing that I was super passionate about, it would be cooking. Like that's the one
Oh,
thing
wow.
that I absolutely love. I love music also, but it's not like my life passion. Cooking is definitely is. That's like I would love to spend the day in the kitchen, like always. So that's kind of why I got into food photography because I'm a big foodie. So just to clear the air there, like that's the one thing. It's not my passion. I really do enjoy it. I love creating. I guess really creating is my passion, but it's not specific to photography. So that being said, so how do I keep it alive every single day? So there's no question that some days are definitely tough. Like you come to the studio and you're like, oh, another day of this, right?
Yeah.
But once you get into the flow of the workflow, like your brain picks back up and you just get into it and whatnot. What I do love about it though is every single day is something else. Even though I love shooting restaurants, it's my favorite thing to shoot. If I had to shoot a restaurant every single day, I'd never be able to make it through the week because
Got it.
in general, creatives have a really hard time with the same thing over and over and over again. So because we shoot products and food, so every single day is a completely new project, totally different than the day before, and that really keeps the drive alive.
Got it. I want to go back to what you said about the passion part, and I think for our listeners, it's an important point. And there's a saying that I've been using a lot on the show is because you could find a lot of people say, what if I'm not passionate about my business, but I'm just doing it for the money. Tomorrow I want to do
Right.
something else for the money. And the short answer is you could survive, you could even thrive without passion towards what you do.
Sure.
But I believe personally, and I've seen this in other businesses, that you'll never get to the fullest potential of your business without passion. You need
Right.
that passion to drive you in that rainy day or that day that you woke up and you're just not in the mood. Yeah. So
Yeah.
ultimately, you got to do what you got to do based on the passion. Now, people confuse passion with, which means like, oh, if I win the lottery tomorrow, will I do photography tomorrow again? Because
Right.
I'm so passionate about the product. I don't think you have to go this far. And of course, especially as a grown up, you develop passions, you switch passions towards different things,
Sure.
what lives leave to you. I think what I mean with passion is that extra grit and that extra passion towards what you do, the excitement you come every day to work with in order to say, I want to be the best version of myself, or I want to be the best food photographer out there. And therefore, you going the extra mile and your own education and doing a reshoot because I'm not happy because of one sort of shadow and that image. Although maybe hundreds of other photographers will say it's just about good. Nobody will realize it. But for
Right.
your own satisfaction, that's where passion comes into play. So I wanted
Yes.
to just clarify that for our listeners because there's a lot of confusion out there about how far do I need to be passionate about what I do.
Right. Yeah, you do need to enjoy the work because if
Yeah.
you dread coming to work every day, that's tough. But yeah, 100%. I always tell this out as well. Is passion gets you into the door, but it's the work ethic and the enjoyment of the work and making sure you're delegating stuff you hate,
Yeah.
and that's what keeps you moving.
Yeah, I just it reminded me. I remember, like in the when I was a kid, my father had a knitting factory. In those days, you still had hundreds of people sewing all
Handcrafted.
day,
Yeah.
handcrafted in New York, made in Brooklyn. Like now we're
Yeah.
back to made in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I remember like we used to go to like a big box retailer. My father was used to go to that section and like literally take apart a hat or see from the outside inside out, so to speak, how it was sewn and so on and so forth. That's also a level of passion. Yeah, you could say they
Right.
want to do market research, but it's the certain understanding. Oh, well, look how these guys actually were able to stitch it this way, and all of a
Sure.
sudden that's the final product. So on the second part, I think you mentioned something very, very interesting, and which on creative side, it's very important, which is just to have a little bit of diversity in the work, just to keep that spice, so to speak, not to get into that daily routine, so to speak. What would you say other business owners that maybe not in the creative space that much, how could they pick up that diversity in their daily activities, not to burn out?
Sure. So in the daily activities, for me personally, like it's not the daily activities that I would recommend creating that diversity. I think it's the outside things. It's like if you have something that you really enjoy, what it really is about getting in the zone, getting that flow state that everyone speaks about. So like I do woodworking on the side. I got picked it up over COVID and I got super into it. I could get lost in my workshop like for 10 hours straight
Wow.
and just completely lose track of time. If not for my kids like saying, "Yeah, we need dinner." Right. So and for me, I have a bunch of different things. Cooking, I'm like that. I like when I don't really have time to cook that often, but like for Yantef or something, so I make most of the food. For 2 days straight. I mean, from morning to night, I am just
Oh,
in the
wow.
kitchen and I always think it's only going to take 10 minutes until I'm done. And then 5 hours later, 10 hours later, right? So you just get into that flow state. So by having some passion, there's that word again, but having some creative outlet, and it doesn't have to be necessarily creative. It could be you like playing chess. I don't know. Whatever it is that you really enjoy, something outside of the workplace that keeps that flow state alive. I think that will spill into your daily work as well.
Let's speak out a little bit about photography because a lot of clients of ours obviously are in the e-commerce business, and it's all about photography. And even in the retail space now, we do ad campaigns and it's all about the photography.
Sure.
What do you, as a photographer, what do you look in the end result of the shot? What do you want that shot to do?
That's a very good question. So it really depends on the industry. So let's take like a typical Amazon listing photo. So there's two aspects of it. Number one is that first image within the search results. So I'm looking, I don't know, for a keyboard, right, to type on. So there's 50 trillion keyboards that somebody can buy on Amazon, right? So you need in one image, not just to showcase the product and show off its beauty, but to answer people's questions, right? When you're looking for something on Amazon, you're not just looking for a keyboard. You want it to be, I don't know, white with a silver rim and mechanical keys. So you're going to write that. Or let's take something that you can show in a photo. Okay, you want like the keys that are like really deep, like not flat like a laptop screen, right? So that's what you're looking for. You put in whatever search term to find that. Okay, so first of all, on the SEO side, make sure if that's your selling point, make sure that's in your SEO. Otherwise, you can have the best photo in the world. It's not even going to show up in the search results, right? So, but then once you get to that, you're in the search results, right? So, simple thing. If you know that's the selling point of your keyboard, so then make sure there's like a little call out and there's a zoom in, like showing in one photo how tall the keys are, because that's what the person is looking for. You put it in your SEO, right? So obviously you know that that's what people look for. So make sure your photography is answering the customer's questions before they ask it. That's really a successful photo for that first search result image. After that, once you get the click, once they're in the listing, what you're looking for is to keep them in the listing. Like a lot of times clients will say, oh, I only need 2 or 3 photos because that's all I need to show off my product. And I say, listen, I'm not trying to sell you on my services. I'm telling you for yourself, you want 7 images, because the longer somebody stays on your listing, answering questions, showing them lifestyle images, the better chance they're going to hit that buy button and put it in their cart. Because if they have just 1 or 2 photos and someone else has 8 photos, they're probably going to be clicking through all 8 photos and watching the video and looking through everything, because they want to be 100% sure that this is the product for them. So the more photos you have in your listing, the better chance it's getting purchased. And then within those lifestyle images, you want to show scale. That's a super important thing. You want to show how big the item is. Sometimes you see, like, we'll use the keyboard as an example. I just have a keyboard sitting right here. That's why I keep on going back to that. So you want to show how big is this keyboard, right? This is a pretty mini Apple keyboard, but how is it? How large is it? So sometimes they'll Photoshop it into an existing stock image, and the scale is completely off, and you have no idea. Is it this big? Is it this big? Like, you can't even tell from the photo. So showing scale is so important. I actually had a client that sells like a poker mat. Like, it's like this huge mat you put out on your dining room table, and it turns it into like a casino style poker table. And he kept on getting comments in the comments that in his reviews. Thank you, reviews saying that we bought it thinking it was small, and it came and it was tremendous. Even though it says that on the picture, it says like 72 by 108 or whatever the dimensions are. Right. So he showed it to me, and he's like, "How come I keep on getting these reviews?" And what he had done was he took my photo, which he asked me just to shoot a flat, simple image of it, and he had somebody on Fiverr Photoshop some playing cards and some poker chips into the image. And the guy, I mean, you only have this large of a space on Amazon, right? So the poker mat took up the top 2/3, and then the bottom third, a full third, was a huge pack of playing cards and a huge thing of poker chips.
Oh, wow.
So people were comparing the size of the mat to the size of those poker chips and playing cards, thinking it was a tiny little mat. And then they get it. It was tremendous. So I told him, I said, go back to your Fiverr guy, keep exactly the same thing, but make the poker chips teeny and the playing card teeny. Never got a bad review again.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
because, the chips and the cards are what people could, know the size, and they could.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very important. Let's speak about, you chose product photography versus real lifestyle photography and full photo shoots. Now, obviously, we're not talking about weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff like that. That's a totally different. Is there anything on when you looked at your business model as far as scalability? Is that something that you took into account, or it was just more of a preference?
So in 2012, I don't think I knew the word scalability.
Okay.
So some people are like natural businessmen and like their mind goes right there. I am not.
It's 12 years ago.
It's 12 years ago. Yeah. I am not like that at all. I have my entire business education from experience and from reading close to 300 books in the last 12 years.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. So everything is learned from books. And when you read that many books and you listen to them that many times, even though I have a terrible memory, so I never necessarily remember specific details, but the true concepts, you end up hearing multiple times throughout different books and different genres and across different platforms.
Exactly.
And those stick. So did I choose product photography because it was scalable? Absolutely not. But about 2.5, 3 years ago, I decided it was time to scale. And it was actually more like 3.5, 4 years ago. And we put a plan in place, and we did scale. Like right now, you're seeing my studio in the background. I used to be shooting in my garage. Now we're in this beautiful studio here. I don't know about beautiful, but it's big. And I have a whole team. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a couple of questions on that, because we have a lot of creative people listening to the show. And I can tell you from like, obviously we're in a similar space because we also have a creative agency. We just do 2 different functions in the creative process.
Right.
So I remember like when we started out, going back 22 years ago, I actually was a graphic designer. I learned the programs and I started to design. At one point, very early on, I decided, you know what, if I'm going to be a graphic designer, I'm going to be a graphic designer the rest of my life. And where could I scale? And then I decided what's really driving me is the impact I'm doing with the creative design. And therefore I decided to become more of a business person and hire my team and give them the creativity in order to, the platform, so to speak, to shine. And 22 plus years later, I'm very happy to say that a lot of people that had their own agencies and ended up coming to PTEX for a couple of years, been able to get a great experience because they were exposed to phenomenal projects. But more importantly, because they were able to do only the creative process instead of all the admin stuff and so on and so forth, while I was doing the business side of things and so on and so forth. So I guess my question to you is, in your case, you are the chief photographer, regardless. I know we've spoken about it. How is scaling a service business where people are so tuned into what the end result, which might be your work, versus starting to bring in people, or maybe the scalability is more on delegating other parts of the business?
Right. So that you just answered the question yourself right now. So,
Okay.
there's always two ways to scale. Either, like you said, giving over the creative to somebody else, which requires training or hiring a high level person or striking it lucky and getting that eighth round draft pick that happens to be an all-star. And then there's the other aspect of just delegating all the stuff that you hate doing in order to grow. So I kind of did both ish. I have okay, let me take you back one step. So the
Sure.
first time I tried to scale. So I had a photographer, Kai Berger. She works independently now. She's amazing. I started her from scratch. She had just gotten married straight out of whatever Lakewood. She knew nothing. She said she had a basic graphic design course, and I taught her everything from A to Z. And she worked for me for like 5 or 6 years. And when I was ready to scale, I was like, okay, so you shoot also, and because she was already shooting like at home and like kids and whatever. So I kind of taught her product photography over the years, and so she started shooting for me. And I very quickly realized that there's no way I can manage both of our projects. Like it's just I don't have the project management in general is not my strong point. I can oversee a project, but I can't the nitty gritty details of the day to day stuff and following up on emails and all that kind of fun stuff. That's definitely not my strong point. So I very quickly hired a project manager, but it was the wrong hire, and she probably would have been a great project manager. Just it wasn't working out between everybody. So I had to shut that down. I didn't even have a head to figure out the details. I said, forget it. Hi, you do your own thing. I'll do my own thing. Let's revisit this in a year or two or whatever. So this next time I was ready to scale, I said, okay, the first thing I need to hire is a project manager. I need to get my processes down. This is already after I read E-Myth. So I need to get my processes down. We need to have a project brief for every single project. And then I can hire another photographer because I don't need to manage them. The project manager can manage them. I just need to give over the creative and, give my input of how something should be lit and then let them run with it. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where we went.
Got it. So you mentioned E-Myth. So for our listeners that are not familiar, E-Myth Revisited is one of my top 10 books. I do have a list of my top 10, and this is, I think, number one on that list. And also, he was actually the number one guest on this show. If you go
Oh,
back
really?
to the first episode, Michael Gerber was actually a guest on the show. So we started our show with Michael Gerber. So you could go back to listen to that
That's
episode.
cool.
I want to get into some, if you don't mind, because I think
Sure.
the conversation you had, there's so many valuable lessons, and I think we have to have more everyday business owners on the show, not so much experts, because you can learn so much.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned a couple of things, I want to dissect it, and I want to go in a little deeper. So first, you mentioned about scaling twice, which means you scaled and you had some failures in
Fail.
that
Yeah.
process, and then
And I learned
you
from them.
started again. So I think this is just a lesson on its own, which means is a lot of business owners that I see will do something and it won't work out, and they say, you know what, it'll never work. And the
Right.
answer is could be that timing wasn't right, could be the hire wasn't right, could be you weren't on the right mindset at the time. So
Right.
never give up. If you're scaling for the reason of scaling, or you're doing a business process because of the importance of why your business needs that process, just because you fail once is not a reason not to try it again. And I think the best example I have with delegation, when I do leaders forums and I speak to business owners and we speak about delegation, the first question I start: have you ever delegate something and it was a huge failure? Like
Disaster.
it was a disaster and it bothered you so much. Why did I tell that person? I could have done it myself. All hands go up. Then there is a couple of people decided because of that fiasco, never delegate again.
Never do it again. Right.
Or they go back and learn the art of delegation, which is a process. There's a trust factor, there's a trust and verify, there's inspect what you expect. There's a process to at which point that person delegates. And our challenge is we're so swamped with work, we finally take a hire, and all of a sudden we delegate like the most important things, our best relationships. We tell the person
Yeah.
because we want to give them extra service. We say, here's my best client. I want you to start taking care of their business because I want another person to be involved. Guess what? There's so many other pieces you could give away before you let go from the most important pieces of your business. So I think for our listeners, that's a key lesson. But I want to ask you a very fundamental question. Maybe it sounds very amateur. Why did you want to scale in the first place?
So there's a couple different reasons I wanted to scale. Number one was obviously to make more money. I
Okay.
felt that if there was more opportunity, there's more people on the team, there's more opportunity. Yeah, so that is all relative because sure, we're doing like last year actually, I had a huge team. I had 3 photographers, I had a salesperson. It was like we had 7, 8 people here, and we were doing like 4 or 5 photo shoots a day. It was crazy. And we were doing close to $1 million in sales, but I was actually losing money.
Mhm.
So just because you're growing doesn't mean you're growing in bottom line. So that was a big learning lesson. But the real thing that was driving me was being a one-man show. I was working like 15 hours a day, every single day, all weekend, doing all the editing myself. I mean, it was crazy. It was really, really crazy. Like right now, I'm probably making, okay, on par with inflation also, but about the same as I was making when I was a one-man show, meaning take home profit. But I come to work at 9 o'clock, 9:30, and I leave at 5, and that's it.
Mm.
And if I want to do something, some editing in the evening, maybe I have a client I need to take care of real quick. Sure, 20 minutes, half hour if I need to, but otherwise I could just say, hey, I'm home already now. We'll take care of it tomorrow. And my editing people will take care of it the next day. So that has been an absolute game changer. There's no way I would have survived doing 15 hours a day and weekends.
Mhm.
I was literally going out of my mind. I'm not joking, working till 2 o'clock in the morning,
Oh,
5 times
wow.
a week. It was crazy.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear how you answer it is because I think this is another lesson is you got to when you do stuff, you have to be intentional on the why you're doing it. I mean, you could
Sure.
say, as you mentioned, a lot of people say, I want to make more money, but then you have to say, what's my path for more money? I know more
Right.
expenses, more people, and so on and so forth. What's my path? But if there is something like you said, I need to be able to delegate enough of my work so I could have a better lifestyle, know my
Right.
hours, and then all of a sudden, even if the end result is the same amount of money, but ultimately for that reason. And I remember when we went into business, we had this conversation with a very creative, talented individual, which was a graphic designer. He told me at that time, how much he makes per year. And he says, I don't want to hire anybody. I control my day. I control how much my output is. I know how much I'm coming home with.
Right.
And I don't want to be managing people. And you can't look at the person and say, you know what, oh, this is your business. This is the style of business. Why don't you start scaling and hiring people? Like,
Right.
it's the same thing. Like, if you decide to open a coffee shop and you want to charge $7 a cup of coffee and have this clientele versus if you want to offer a $1.50 a coffee and have the other clientele, who is right and
Right.
who is wrong? You want to know what's working for you. Don't just assume something and do it because somebody else did it. And I think photographers out there or even creatives out there, not everybody's meant to have a team and manage a team
Sure.
because going back to the e-myth, you could be a baker and baking phenomenal baked goods,
Cupcakes.
but
Right.
you're not a business owner. And you don't
Right.
realize, little do you know, when you start becoming a business owner, all of a sudden you're opening the store, you're covering the bank, cash flow, you're hiring, you're taking out the garbage, you're doing everything
Yeah. Everything
and
except for
baking.
baking. No,
Yeah.
probably except for baking.
Yeah, except for
Yeah.
baking. So I think that's a very important point. So let's talk about in the process of scaling, what are some pitfalls or some wins that you had that you could share with the audience?
Okay, so one huge pitfall was last year, like I mentioned, like we were growing, growing, and I realized I was actually losing money, and that was a big problem. So we had to completely revamp and let a few people go and change over the staff a little bit, which was really tough. Don't confuse growth with profit. That's you got to know your numbers and see what's really happening, and don't be blind to it because I was blind to it. Like I saw my bank account going down, 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 but I just I don't know. My brain didn't go there because I saw how much work we were doing, but like whatever. So that was a big, like I said, I'm not a business person naturally. So like my
Mm,
brain didn't see the red flags, even though I noticed them, but like it didn't set off the red flag. So definitely learned from that experience quite a bit. But the gains are, like I said, like if you do have the right team in place and you treat them right, like my employees will bend over backwards for me because I treat them super. Like last week, I usually this last week in December is quiet anyways. So last week, one of my employees, my photographer, he said that he needs the week off. I said no problem. Yeah, take it.
beautiful.
One day, are you able to come in if we need you? We didn't need him anyway, so it worked out perfect. And yeah, so that didn't mean I have to work a little harder last week, and I was a little playing catch up. Like Fridays, I usually leave 11, 12 o'clock. I was in the studio till almost 2:30 because I had to try to catch up a few things that he would have taken care of. But I was able to give them the entire week off, and so they know I have their back. I've been my stylist. She needed next week Wednesday. She had some class or something that she needed to take, and for now we didn't have anything booked. But I didn't want to tell her for sure take the class because that means I can't use her that day. So, but it sounded like it was really important to her because she kept on asking about it. So I was like, you know what? Do the class. We'll figure out what to do. If we need to make it up another time, we'll make it up another time, and I'll figure it out for Wednesday. No problem. So they're ready to go. The extra, not that it's an exchange. Like I'm not doing it so that they should give me something back. But if you're human to your employees, they're human back to you, and they will do what you need to do. So with the smaller team that we have now, I have an editor, project manager, stylist, and a photographer, and myself. So with the smaller team, we have a much more tight knit group. And that's been huge for us because everybody kind of works together with each other and like things are flowing. So it's nice. Good, it's a good
Beautiful.
place to be.
Beautiful. Another question on this topic, which is something that I've spoken a lot, and previous guest has been stressing this a lot, which we live in a world that employees want a certain autonomy in order to be able to
Right.
develop something and call it their own, so to speak, in a process or in a creative and in the creative process, it's even harder because there's a vision usually from the
Right.
top, so to speak, how the end result needs to look. How do you balancing that your team should feel that they have the autonomy on doing something, yet doesn't deviate from a direction and a vision that you might have for the project?
So in general, I do like to let people run with things.
Okay.
That's just my style, meaning I don't want to get involved in the nitty gritty detail. I want them to do it. And then actually taking a step back, in general, the way I do things is I do it first and then I figure it out after. So I'll jump into a project, just start shooting, start doing it. And even like today, like if I have a product that I'm not 100% sure how I want it shot, I'll put it down. I'll literally just put some lights up, take a picture. I was like, okay, is that good? Is it not good? What needs to be changed? And should the light move around more from this side? But to try to figure out the entire thing in my head beforehand, that's just like, it's a waste of time. Just put it down, take a shot, and then see where to go from here. So I do the same thing with my photographer. Like he'll say, how do you want the shot? So, we'll strategize a little bit, and then he's a little bit like super detail oriented. So he'll be like, oh, but should I do it this way or should I do it that way? I was like, I don't know, just do one of them and then
And let's
see
see
what
how it
happens.
looks. Yeah.
So he's like, okay, you got it, boss. And then from there, I know that he'll get it because I've trained. He was pretty decent before he came here. I saw his portfolio; it was excellent. But I've really like honed his skills, like trained him in to how I like things to look. So he knows like kind of my thought process of how I light things and how I go work from there.
Beautiful. So on that note, let me end with one very important question that I've saved for the last, which is,
Sure.
I know that you don't do a lot of marketing. You actually were very vocal about not doing a lot of marketing, but
Yeah.
when you look at certain chats, certain groups where, name a photographer, so to speak, and then your
Yeah.
name gets tagged a lot, what would you say is the reason for all these tags?
Probably because, I mean, okay, it's a number of things, but one thing is I've been around pretty much the longest. So I definitely have my name out there. Number two is, I mean, Baruch Hashem, my work does speak for itself. So, people are very happy with the results. So like in general, the best referral engine you can possibly do is to have happy clients, and happy clients tell other happy clients, even if they tell their brother-in-law or their sister-in-law or whatever, but it's like well known that you're the guy. So that's important. Mishpacha magazine, my name has been in there pretty much every week for the last 8 years. So that's been huge. LinkedIn has been massive for me. One of the things I love to do is I love to write. So LinkedIn is tremendous. I mean, if you don't know how to write, it's worth hiring a content writer for you. Got to find the right one, but it is definitely worth putting your time and effort into LinkedIn because like it's brought me, I mean, just perfect example. Yesterday I posted, I'm looking for a salesperson, 15,000 views, 200 likes, over 200 likes by now, dozens and dozens and dozens of comments. Tons of people reached out. Actually, a guy calling right now. Someone I spoke to yesterday, I told him to call me today, a potential hire. So LinkedIn is a tremendous, tremendous avenue for marketing, and it's free. So assuming you're not paying someone to write your content.
Got it. Where can people find out more about you?
So LinkedIn, if you want to find out about me personally, LinkedIn is the place to go. My websites are hoodiegreenberger.com. It's HUDI, not Y. So hoodiegreenberger.com, as well as hoodieshootsfood.com. That one is specifically for restaurants and hotels, which is what I need a salesperson for. I want to try to market to that.
Beautiful. The links, resources mentioned in this episode, check out the show notes at www.ptxgroup.com/podcast. Let's close with the 4 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Go for it. No, I'm
Number
not good
one.
at rapid fire, but we'll try.
Number 1, a book that changed your life.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. That was probably the first of all my books.
Yes, great. Still a great book.
Absolutely.
Number two, a piece of advice you got that you'll never forget.
From another book from Scott Adams, who writes Dilbert.
Yes.
Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep.
Beautiful. Number three,
Love it.
anything you wish you could go back and do differently?
I would have scaled earlier, I think.
And last but and final question, what's still on your bucket list to achieve?
The restaurants. That's my dream.
Oh,
Open a
wow.
restaurant. So the goal is when I have so much money that if I lose $2 million in the restaurant, that and I will still be okay. That's when I'm opening the restaurant.
I can imagine how the menu will look.
Yes, it'll be beautiful. I promise it.
Buddy, thank you so much for joining us. I know your time is valuable. That is why, in the name of listeners, we'll forever be grateful for sharing some of your time with us today. It's been a blast.
Pleasure. Thank you, Manny.
My
Take
pleasure.
care.